The royal beat tonight begins with a decision so blunt, so unfiltered, that viewers across Britain are still asking how the palace allowed it to happen. No build-up, no symbolism, no soft diplomacy. Just a direct, unmistakable blow to the monarchy's public facade. The descendants of Prince Philip's sister issued their private memorial invitations, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, was marked as essential, while Camilla, Queen Consort, was deliberately excluded. Not omitted, not misplaced, excluded by blood request. And that single line has sent shockwaves through royal circles that insiders say will not fade anytime soon. From the moment the leaked invitation list began circulating within the palace, aides reportedly froze mid-stride. One described the atmosphere as instant crisis mode, like the walls themselves started listening. The list bore signatures from the old Hesse lineage, the branch of Philip's family rarely seen, rarely heard, yet deeply rooted in European nobility. Their decisions are never impulsive, insiders warn. When they speak with purpose. And this time, their message was unmistakable. Catherine was not merely welcomed, her presence was labelled indispensable. According to sources close to the planning team, her name appeared circled, underlined twice, accompanied by a handwritten note referencing custodianship. The term alone has rattled royal commentators, raising questions about whether this invitation is simply ceremonial or whether it signals a deeper, ideological endorsement. Behind palace doors, the reaction verged on panic. Senior courtiers demanded immediate clarification. One aide, according to someone present in the room, asked whether a clerical mistake could be responsible. The reply was immediate and chilling. "There are no mistakes in this family's handwriting." Another source claims that a member of the organising committee made a phone call to London earlier this month and stated bluntly, "This is deliberate, and you will not revise history again." The phrasing, sharp and unmistakably loaded, has triggered speculation about lingering resentment tied to the monarchy's handling of earlier decades, particularly the years surrounding Diana and the rapid rehabilitation of Camilla. Multiple insiders confirm that Charles was informed within minutes. His response was described as controlled but volcanic underneath, choosing restraint rather than confrontation. He understood instantly, sources say, that challenging a private family memorial, especially one linked to the late Duke of Edinburgh, would only escalate the crisis. Camilla, on the other hand, reportedly demanded answers, only to be told that no explanation had been provided to the palace. Meanwhile, Catherine remained silent. Those close to her say she appeared stunned, even unsettled, by the weight of the endorsement. For years, she has stepped carefully around internal politics, presenting a surface of calm dignity. But this time, that silence was interpreted by commentators as a declaration all on its own, a quiet acceptance of being chosen by a lineage that believes the monarchy's moral compass has drifted. The real thunderclap, however, comes from what this move represents. Not a snub, a stance, a symbolic alignment with Catherine as the embodiment of traditional royal integrity, and an equally symbolic rejection of Camilla as the face of compromise and rewritten history. The decision exposes fractures the palace has long attempted to bury under curated appearances and carefully crafted statements. Tonight, royal experts warn that this is not a minor breach of etiquette, but the opening shot of a much older dispute resurfacing. One historian told our program, "What you are seeing is not rebellion, it is remembrance. This family remembers everything the palace prefers to forget." And as viewers continue flooding social media, trying to piece together what this unprecedented divide truly means for the future of the monarchy, one thing is already clear. This memorial, intended as a quiet moment of family reflection, has erupted into the most consequential power tremor since the early years of the Diana era. What happens next is uncertain, but as insiders hinted today, this invitation list may be only the beginning of a much larger reckoning. The storm now unfolding inside the monarchy didn't begin with the leaked invitation list. It began decades earlier, according to those who have followed the Hesse lineage closely, when the family of Prince Philip's sister watched their own history erased, softened, or strategically ignored in favor of a cleaner royal narrative. Tonight, as we continue our exclusive coverage, insiders are drawing a direct line between that long-buried resentment and the decision to bar Camilla while elevating Catherine. What seemed at first like an unexpected breach of etiquette is now emerging as the culmination of generational grievance. To understand why this moment has detonated so violently, we need to revisit a seldom discussed chapter of Philip's background. His sister, Princess Sophie of Hesse, endured exile, political suspicion, and gradual removal from British royal visibility. Her descendants grew up with what one family historian calls a century of consequences, watching their lineage trimmed away from official accounts to prevent complicated associations from overshadowing the House of Windsor. They accepted this in silence, but they didn't forget. Several relatives have said privately that they felt their sacrifices were repaid with erasure. This is the context in which Camilla's rise was viewed. According to one German cousin, speaking anonymously to avoid the palace press machine, the monarchy changed its rules overnight to accommodate her, yet could not spare a paragraph to acknowledge what Philip's sister suffered. That sentiment, the idea that Camilla represents selective memory and selective morality, runs deep across the extended European branches. It is not personal grievance alone, it is ideological, and then comes the revelation that has turned quiet resentment into active decision-making. Philip himself, in his later years, allegedly expressed concerns about the monarchy drifting too far from its core values. A source close to the Hesse family claims that he spoke not of bloodline purity, but of integrity, duty, and unshakable honor. The same source insists that when Philip referred to a future custodian of these ideals, the name he used was not Camilla's. Inside the palace, officials have dismissed these claims as family folklore, but the timing is impossible to ignore. Members of the Hesse lineage believe that Philip's hopes were entrusted to them, quietly and informally, and that they now have a responsibility to preserve what he valued. This, they say, is why Catherine was chosen. She is seen as a woman who has endured the storm without exploiting it, a figure whose silence carries more weight than another's speeches. One insider familiar with their conversations says the family admires Catherine precisely because she does not play the political game. She doesn't brief, she doesn't leak, she doesn't barter in the currency of scandal. For them, that is honor. It is a pointed contrast to the way Camilla's public journey has been framed, first as a taboo presence, then a controversial partner, and eventually a queen sustained through relentless public relations, rehabilitation. A former palace staffer who worked during the transitional years described the shift as a rewrite done in real time. According to them, many older royalists quietly disapproved of the rapid transformation of Camilla's image, arguing that it disregarded the emotional wounds left from the Diana period. It was too fast, too curated, and the family across Europe noticed, the staffer said. They felt the monarchy bent its own rules. This helps explain the almost ritualistic tone behind the memorial invitation. The Hesse descendants were not simply planning an event, they were delivering a verdict. Their exclusion of Camilla is framing her not as a villain, but as a symbol of a monarchy willing to negotiate its own history when convenient. In contrast, Catherine is positioned as continuity, restraint, the quiet middle pathway Philip reportedly cherished. One of the most striking comments we've heard so far comes from a relative in Austria who said, "Camilla represents revision. Catherine represents remembrance. We chose remembrance." This line alone has ricocheted across royal watchers, solidifying the perception that this dispute is not interpersonal but philosophical. Within the palace, however, this narrative is causing real damage. Staff loyal to Charles consider it a dangerous oversimplification, even a form of character assassination. They argue that Camilla has spent decades stabilizing the monarchy, not undermining it. But critics counter that stabilizing through image management is not the same as stabilizing through principle. The situation has become so heated that one advisor reportedly warned that allowing this narrative to spread unchecked could create a schism impossible to repair. And yet, the more the palace attempts to dismiss or downplay the meaning behind the invitation list, the more determined the Hesse family seems to become. Tonight, observers are asking whether this is merely a symbolic protest or the beginning of a deeper ideological fracture, one in which Catherine is now, involuntarily, the standard-bearer of an older world, and Camilla the representative of a rewritten one. And whether intentional or not, the line has been drawn. The past is no longer whispering, it is speaking loudly, and the palace can't silence it this time. The fallout inside Buckingham Palace escalated with a speed that even senior aides privately admit they were unprepared for. What began as an uncomfortable surprise quickly hardened into a full-scale internal meltdown, with every department, from communications to protocol to security, scrambling to determine whether the memorial invitation list was a breach they could fix or a declaration they were powerless to counter. By the time the original document circulated through official channels, the shock had matured into something far more serious: fear that the monarchy was facing a rift that could no longer be contained behind closed doors. According to several officials present during those first frantic hours, phones rang non-stop as staff attempted to verify whether the list was authentic. The hope, fleeting, desperate, was that a rogue organizer or miscommunication had caused Camilla's absence. That hope evaporated when the palace received direct confirmation from the organizing committee. The Hesse family had signed the final version themselves, with no revisions allowed. It wasn't a draft, one source recounts. It was final, and we were told to stop asking questions. What stunned palace officials further was the note attached to the communication. The wording, according to someone who read it, was stark, cold, and unmistakably intentional. It stated that the memorial was a private commemoration of blood and history, and therefore subject only to the wishes of Philip's surviving relatives. While the tone remained polite, insiders say it carried an unmistakable undercurrent, a warning that any attempt from palace staff to reinterpret, adjust, or politicize the decision would be seen as interference. This is where the panic truly set in. One aide tried to raise the possibility of issuing a gentle clarification for the press, something vague enough to diffuse speculation while avoiding direct confrontation. The idea was immediately shut down by senior advisors. As one insider bluntly put it, "A clarification is only possible when you have control, and we didn't." In the hours that followed, the tension reached a level one source described as funeral within a funeral, a phrase now echoing through royal watchers online. Tonight, observers are asking whether this is merely a symbolic protest or the beginning of a deeper ideological fracture, one in which Catherine is now, involuntarily, the standard-bearer of an older world, and Camilla the representative of a rewritten one. And whether intentional or not, the line has been drawn. The past is no longer whispering, it is speaking loudly, and the palace can't silence it this time. While she maintained her composure, staff members noticed her turning inward, analyzing the political implications in silence. Catherine's discomfort, according to observers, wasn't about the honor, it was about what the honor symbolized. Acceptance meant alignment meant conflict. In stark contrast, Camilla's response came swiftly and sharply. Sources report that the Queen Consort demanded a detailed explanation from palace officials, pressing them to contact the organizing family directly. When informed that the Hesse relatives preferred not to engage in discussion, Camilla allegedly reacted with a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger. One aide noted that she does not take exclusion lightly, especially when it threatens the legitimacy she has spent decades rebuilding. Senior figures loyal to Charles reacted defensively, portraying the decision as a misguided expression of nostalgia. But others inside the palace, particularly those with long memories, recognized the deeper meaning. This was personal, one courtier said, and it was aimed at correcting what some believed was an injustice left unresolved since the early 1990s. Tension rose further when a leaked comment from a member of the Hesse family surfaced. According to that relative, when a palace official attempted to probe the reasoning behind the exclusion, they were told, "This is deliberate. You will not revise history again." The phrase is now being debated across British media, with commentators split over whether it refers to the monarchy's treatment of Philip's sister, the public reframing of Camilla's past, or the lingering trauma from Diana's era. Inside the palace, that phrase hit its target. It reopened wounds many believed had healed, or had simply been buried. It resurrected memories of hurried public relations campaigns, rebranding efforts, and a narrative rewritten to stabilize an institution at risk. And this is where the crisis became existential. Catherine, whose name was at the center of the storm, found herself watched more closely than ever. Sources report that the Queen Consort demanded a detailed explanation from palace officials, pressing them to contact the organizing family directly. When informed that the Hesse relatives preferred not to engage in discussion, Camilla allegedly reacted with a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger. One aide noted that she does not take exclusion lightly, especially when it threatens the legitimacy she has spent decades rebuilding. The younger generation of staff, many of whom admire Catherine, suggested that this endorsement might reflect broader public sentiment, not just private family feeling. The older guard, fiercely loyal to Charles, viewed it as a dangerous misstep, capable of destabilizing the entire hierarchy. As the hours passed and panic settled into grim awareness, one thing became clear to everyone inside the palace. This was no longer about a memorial. It was about legitimacy, history, and the battle for moral inheritance. And as insiders warned by nightfall, the hardest part was still coming. The family behind this decision wasn't finished making itself heard. From the moment Catherine received the formal confirmation that her presence was not only welcomed but required, the emotional weight of the situation began to press down on her with a force few outside the palace could understand. By all accounts, she did not view the Hesse endorsement as a triumph. If anything, insiders say she reacted with unease, even apprehension. What many interpreted publicly as a symbolic elevation felt, in private, like an unexpected and heavy summons into a conflict she had never intended to enter. Those close to Catherine described the days leading up to the memorial as unusually quiet. She withdrew slightly, choosing contemplation over conversation, and spent long evenings in her study, reviewing notes, letters, and archival material connected to Prince Philip's relationship with his sister's descendants. One aide recalled that she seemed troubled not by the honor itself, but by the implications behind it. She understood this wasn't a gesture, the aide said. It was a burden. They weren't offering her a place, they were offering her a legacy, end quote. And that legacy, according to new accounts emerging from within the extended family, was far deeper than the palace had ever acknowledged. Several Hesse cousins had reportedly held private discussions over the past year, debating whether the monarchy was losing its moral center. Their conclusion, insiders claim, was that the institution needed a figure who embodied the values Philip had upheld, values they believed had eroded under modern pressures and political maneuvering. In these conversations, Catherine became the name repeated most often. "We chose her because she resembles the world that Philip trusted," one relative allegedly said. "Not in blood, but in character." These remarks, now circulating among royal observers, have intensified the sense that Catherine has been thrust, unwillingly, into the role of a symbolic corrective. William watched this transformation unfold with growing concern. Friends of the couple say he saw the toll early, noting her loss of appetite, her increasingly long hours of reflection, and the heaviness in her voice during private discussions. One evening, as reported by a longtime associate, he confronted the issue directly, telling her, "They're pulling you into something bigger than remembrance." His worry was not just about the political implications but about the emotional cost of being positioned as the moral counterpoint to Camilla, a situation Catherine never sought. But the Hesse family showed no hesitation. If anything, their resolve strengthened in the days before the memorial. Handwritten letters sealed with crests long absent from British court life began arriving at Kensington Palace, each expressing support, not in polite diplomatic phrasing, but in solemn, almost ancestral tones. "We remember, and we stand with you." Read one from a Polish noble house. Another, from an Austrian relative, concluded with, "Tradition must anchor itself to honor, not convenience." These letters, according to insiders, moved Catherine deeply. One staff member disclosed that she cried upon reading the third envelope, not from flattery but from the realization that she had been quietly chosen as a guardian of something both ancient and fraught. She understood fully that accepting this symbolic role might provoke silent hostility within the palace's most protected circles. Yet rejecting it risked appearing dismissive of a family whose loyalty to Philip had never wavered. To better understand the connection Philip maintained with his sister's lineage, Catherine reportedly began reading transcripts and archived correspondence from his later years. These documents revealed a pattern of thoughtful exchanges, private calls, and coded references to the monarchy's future. Phrases that, insiders say, took on new meaning in the context of recent events. One aide claims Catherine found a recurring sentiment in Philip's writing, a belief that the monarchy's survival depended on steadfast integrity, not shifting alliances. Whether or not Philip intended these words as guidance to her specifically, they now sit at the center of the unfolding narrative. As the day of the memorial approached, the pressure intensified. Commentators speculated openly about whether Catherine's attendance signaled a deeper power struggle. Loyalists to Charles attempted to downplay her role, while supporters of the younger generation hinted that her presence marked a turning point in the monarchy's moral trajectory. The chatter seeped through the palace walls, creating a tense, electric atmosphere. By the night before the memorial, Catherine stood alone in her private room, contemplating her place in a story she had not written. There were no speeches to prepare, no public statements to craft. The significance of her presence was already larger than words. She faced a simple truth. By walking into that memorial, she would carry not only her own dignity, but the weight of a lineage that had waited decades to speak. What she did not yet know was how dramatically that weight would shift the moment she stepped through those doors, and how visibly the old order would react when confronted with a new center of gravity. The Memorial Day arrived with an atmosphere so taut that even seasoned royal correspondents admitted they had never felt anything quite like it. From the moment Catherine stepped out of her car, it was clear this gathering was no ceremonial footnote. The air carried none of the grandeur of state functions, none of the glossy choreography the palace normally deploys. Instead, it felt raw, ancestral, almost judicial, as if the weight of Philip's forgotten lineage had finally chosen its moment to speak aloud. Inside the hall, silence fell the instant she entered. Conversations paused mid-sentence, chairs shifted, and dozens of eyes tracked her movements with a solemnity that no reporter, even the most cynical, could dismiss. Several members of the Hesse family rose instinctively to greet her. An elderly duchess approached first, taking Catherine's hand and brushing it lightly with her lips. A German cousin followed, placing a folded letter into her palm without a word. These gestures, observers say, were not etiquette. They were endorsements, declarations, and acknowledgements of her new symbolic status. Catherine herself maintained composure, but aides who accompanied her describe a flicker of emotion beneath the calm. A recognition that she had just stepped into a space where history, memory, and quiet rebellion converged. As one insider put it, she understood instantly. This wasn't the monarchy's room, this was Philip's room. While the atmosphere inside was reverent, the mood outside turned icy. Camilla had arrived. Though denied entry in advance, she chose to come regardless, her motorcade pulling up near the venue with quiet determination. Those present say her expression was rigid, her posture defiant. She did not hide. She wanted to be seen, to make it clear she would not accept erasure without a fight. But what followed was not the polite negotiation she might have expected. Two senior members of Philip's extended family, both among the eldest in attendance, stepped forward to intercept her. No palace guards, no aides, no intermediaries. Just lineage confronting legitimacy. Witnesses described the exchange as a tense, whispering standoff. Camilla asserted her right to honor Philip, invoking her title, her marriage, and her years of service. But the relatives didn't waver. Their response, according to multiple sources, was delivered in quiet, unwavering tones. Titles fade, legacy does not. The words landed like a strike. Camilla pushed back, demanding to know whether this was a staged attempt to crown Catherine early. The reply was cold enough to silence even her staff. Catherine never asked. You always did. Inside the hall, murmurs began spreading as word of the confrontation filtered through. Catherine was discreetly informed. Those close to her say her expression didn't change, but she grew visibly still, an indication she had anticipated conflict, but not the directness of it. She had never wanted to be the dividing line in a dynastic dispute, yet here she was, becoming the symbol both sides were interpreting in their own image. Camilla's final words before leaving have already become a lightning rod across social media. Looking straight into the eyes of the man who blocked her entry, she said, "You'll regret turning your back on the crown. This family eats its own." And with that, she turned, stepped back into her car, and departed without further attempt to enter. Back inside, the memorial continued uninterrupted, but attendees were acutely aware that something irreversible had just happened at the door. Every nod toward Catherine, every gesture of respect, suddenly carried double meaning, not only honoring Philip's memory, but quietly defying the institution that had kept his sister's branch at arm's length for decades. By the end of the service, one senior relative remarked sotto voce to a colleague, "The line has been drawn now. It cannot be undone." And as the doors closed behind Catherine and she stepped back into the world waiting outside, it was already clear that this confrontation was not an isolated event. It was the spark that would ignite the aftershocks still to come. When the memorial ended and the doors finally opened to the outside world, the monarchy emerged, altered in ways that no official statement could conceal. Catherine stepped out first, carrying an aura that even seasoned royal reporters struggled to define. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't authority. It was something quieter, heavier, a recognition that she had become, willingly or not, the figure around whom the old and new versions of the monarchy were now in open collision. Inside the palace, the aftermath unfolded with a speed that surprised even those accustomed to royal turbulence. Courtiers began referring to the endorsement from Philip's lineage as the shift, a term whispered with equal parts fear and fascination. Catherine, who once moved through the institution with polite invisibility, now found every step scrutinized. Her public appearances were analyzed frame by frame, her silences interpreted as strategy, and her expressions dissected for hints of where the balance of power might settle next. For her, the shift felt suffocating. Insiders say that in the days following the memorial, she retreated into routine, hoping to diffuse the energy around her. But the more she sought normalcy, the more the narrative hardened. She was no longer simply the Princess of Wales. She had become the moral counterweight to a monarchy wrestling with its own identity. Camilla's reaction, meanwhile, came through quieter channels but with unmistakable anger. Trusted aides describe Windsor as frozen, the atmosphere brittle, with meetings called behind closed doors. She did not speak publicly, but those familiar with her thinking say she felt not only excluded but delegitimized. For a woman who had painstakingly rebuilt her reputation over more than 20 years, the public humiliation cut deeply. And while she made no overt declarations of retaliation, her actions spoke through the reactivation of long-standing media contacts and private conversations aimed at recalibrating the narrative. Charles found himself caught between loyalty to his wife and the haunting shadow of his father's legacy. Sources close to the king say he understood immediately that the memorial was not a random family dispute, it was a signal. A vote of confidence placed not in him, but in Catherine. For a monarch striving to maintain stability, the symbolism was deeply unsettling. Among palace staff, the divide widened. Younger aides, more sympathetic to Catherine's style and values, began privately questioning whether the institution's future might depend on a shift toward the virtues she represents. Older aides, fiercely protective of the current order, viewed the Hesse endorsement as a dangerous attempt to influence the monarchy from the outside. And then came the whispers, barely audible at first, hinting that the Hesse relatives may possess additional letters from Philip, notes that could further illuminate his views on the monarchy's moral future. Whether true or rumour, the mere possibility has fueled speculation across Britain, raising the stakes of an already precarious moment. Tonight, commentators agree on one thing. The past has returned, not as nostalgia, but as reckoning. And Catherine, without asking, has become the centre of gravity in a monarchy now forced to confront its own competing loyalties. If this story has shown anything, it's that the royal facade is thinner than we think, and the fractures run deeper than the palace ever admits. Thank you for watching, and if you don't want to miss what comes next in this unprecedented royal upheaval, make sure to subscribe, stay tuned, and keep your eyes on the unfolding storm, because this is only the beginning.